ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. A couple of weeks ago when we last had the Tafseer class, we were analyzing verses number 2 and 3 of Surah Al-Baqarah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, that book where there is no doubt in it, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, it is a source of guidance for the God-fearing people. And then from verse number 3, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes on to mention some characteristics and some qualities of these God-fearing people. The الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ, that these God-fearing people, they believe in the unseen. And number 2, وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ, that these God-fearing people, they establish their salah and they establish their namaz. And I mentioned that the tafsir or the commentary of وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ here is that these God-fearing people, not only do they read their 5 namazes a day, but on top of that, they read their namaz in such a way where 100% their devotion and concentration is towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That their heart, their mind, their limbs are all engaged in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and their hearts, their minds, their limbs are all towards the concentration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As mentioned in the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, when Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, in a form of person, he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that explain to me that what is meant by ihsan. فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ ihsan, upon which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam replied by saying that worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ta'bud Allah ka'annaka tarah. That worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if as though you are seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if that is not possible, if you cannot assume that you are seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَاهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَاكَ, then assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing you, is watching you, and perform your prayers and your ibadah in that particular state. Now from this particular fragment, وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ, I mentioned that we will take this opportunity to look at some contemporary issues with regards to namaz and salah. Now, many things with regards to namaz you can find in books, such as Talimul Haq, Beshti Zawad. In quite detail, they mention the procedure of reading namaz. If this happens, then your namaz breaks, so this is makruh, or this is disliked in namaz, and so on. So obviously, those kind of issues I'm not going to mention, or I'm not going to discuss in the dars or in the lesson today. But the contemporary issues, things which you cannot find in Talimul Haq, in Beshti Zawad, and in other books, those kind of issues will be looked at in detail in the lessons and in the dars. And like for example, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the issue of reading Fajr namaz and Isha namaz in extreme latitude, like countries above 50 degrees latitude, such as England, North Canada, the Scandinavian countries such as Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. So in those countries, what time during the summer months would you read your Fajr namaz and would you read your Isha namaz? So this was something which was discussed a couple of weeks ago. And also a couple of weeks ago, we looked at which time, or those times where it is considered haram and prohibited to read namaz, and those times which is considered makruh, tahrimi, and severely disliked to read namaz. Now the last issue which we looked at very briefly, and I promise that the next time we have the lesson we will look at it in more detail, is the issue with regards to whether in the Hanafi fiqh or whether in the Hanafi school of thought is a person allowed to combine his namaz, or if a person is allowed to read 2 namazes in one time or in one prescribed time. That whether a person is allowed to read his Zuhr and Asr namaz during Zuhr time, or whether a person is allowed to read his Maghrib and Isha during his Maghrib time, and so on. So the question or the issue which we're going to discuss for the next 5 minutes or so is the issue of combining 2 prayers during one prayer time, during one prescribed time. Now what do the Hanafi jurists and what do the Hanafi scholars say with regards to this particular issue? Now, I mentioned couple of weeks ago, that no school of thought or no scholar has said that a person is allowed to combine his prayers without any reason. That without a uzr, without an excuse, without a reason, to combine your prayer, that is something which is not allowed in Islam, and that is something which is impermissible, and this is the view of all the schools of thought and of all the scholars. A person say, for example, he's read Zuhr namaz, then without any reason, he's not in the state of traveling, he's not ill, it isn't raining outside, then without any reason for him to read Asr namaz straight away, then that is something which is considered impermissible and something which is not allowed in Islam. Even to the extent that there is a hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi narrated by Sayyiduna Abdullah bin Abbas anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever combines his prayers min ghayri uzrin, without a uzr, without an excuse, then faqad ata baban min abwab al-kaba'ir, then verily or indeed he has done a kabira guna, indeed he has done a big sin and he has done a great sin. So from this we can understand that without a uzr, without an excuse, to combine your Zuhr and Asr, to combine your Maghrib and Isha during Maghrib time or Zuhr and Asr during Zuhr time, that is something which is not allowed according to all schools of thought. So that is the first angle to look at this particular masla. The second angle is that if there is a uzr or if there is an excuse. Now according to Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, according to Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, they have said that if a person is traveling, or if it is raining outside, then that person will be allowed to combine two prayers during one prescribed time. So, for example, just say if a person is reading Zuhr namaz, and then outside it's raining heavily, and it's going to be difficult for him to come back 2-3 hours later to read his Asr namaz, then in that situation it will be permissible for him to combine his Zuhr and Asr namaz together. Or a person say he's ready Zuhr namaz, he stopped over at a service station, he's ready Zuhr namaz and he's traveling, then according to the teachings of Imam Shafi, Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh, they have said that that person would be allowed to combine his Zuhr and Asr together at that particular time. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayh has also added another excuse, another uzr, and he has said that if a person is ill, marad, then that is also an excuse. So just say if a person read Zuhr namaz during Zuhr time and is so ill that he won't be able to come for the Asr namaz later on, then that person during the Zuhr time, during the Zuhr period, will be allowed to combine his Zuhr and Asr prayer. So that is the mazhab, or that is, you could say, the maslak of Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayh, Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayh. Now going back onto the Hanafi fiqh, according to the teachings of Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh, under no circumstances, under no situations or scenarios, a person is allowed to combine his salah. Irrespective of whether you are ill, irrespective of whether you are traveling, irrespective whether there is a flood outside, it doesn't matter. Okay? A Hanafi follower is not allowed or is not permitted to combine his prayer. During Zuhr time, he will have to read his Zuhr. During Asr time, he will have to read his Asr, and so on. It will not be permissible for him to combine his prayers. And the only time Hanafi follower is allowed to combine his prayers is, as all of you know, during the days of Hajj. On 9th of Dhul Hijjah, if he is in Arafah, then according to certain conditions and criteria, that if he is reading namaz in Masjid al-Namira, and if he is reading namaz behind the Amir of Hajj, then he will be allowed to combine his Zuhr and Asr prayer during Zuhr time, and later on, when he has, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, when he has gone to Muzdalifah, then during the Isha time, he will combine his Maghrib and Isha. They are the only two situations a person is allowed to combine his prayers, and other situations, irrespective of the situation, you are not allowed to combine your prayers. Now the reason why I'm actually mentioning this particular hadith, this particular ruling, according to all schools of thought, is in particular when you go to universities and colleges and you see other people from other madhabs and other schools of thought, they kind of combine their Zuhr and Asr together. So a person who's like a Hanafi follower, he gets a bit confused and he himself that, if this person is doing it, then I should also do it as well, and it kind of creates confusion in his mind. So that's why I've actually touched on this particular topic, to show everyone that this is the views of the other schools of thought. However, the Hanafi school of thought in this particular ruling is that you are not allowed to combine your prayers irrespective of the situation. Now, moving along further, just to further elaborate or consolidate this particular ruling, there is an important principle in fiqh or in jurisprudence, and that is that you have to act upon the Holy Quran. It's obvious, but it needs to be made clear. That is that a ruling or an injunction, firstly, you'll see what the Holy Quran says. And you will act, and if the Holy Quran says something, then you will have to act upon that. There's no ifs or buts. Why? Because the verses of the Holy Quran, they are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is free from any defect, it is free from any mistake. So in a ruling or in an injunction, first of all, we look at the Holy Quran. Now, if there is a hadith, or if there is a saying of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam which contradicts the verse of the Holy Quran, then the Hanafi scholars, what they will do is, instead of omitting that hadith, instead of let go of that hadith, they will try to interpretate the hadith in such a way that it is according to the verse of the Holy Quran. Instead of not acting upon the hadith at all, the Hanafi scholars, they will interpretate the hadith in such a way that it becomes accordant, or it becomes in line of the verse of the Holy Quran. And then, if that is not possible, that if they cannot interpretate the hadith, then the last scenario will be that they will have to omit the hadith, and they will stop acting upon the hadith, and we will act upon the verse of the Holy Quran. Now, when we look through the Holy Quran with regard to this issue of combining your prayers, in Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said a verse which is so clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta, which basically means that your namazes, your prayers, they are fixed on the believers at its fixed time. Kitaban mawquta, at its fixed time. Now, what does this verse say? Is that basically Fajr, you read it during Fajr time. Your Zuhr, you read it during Zuhr time. Your Asr, you read it during Asr time. Maghrib, you read it during Maghrib. Isha, you read it during Isha. That's the verse, that is the tafsir, you could say, or that is the commentary of that particular verse. That all prayers, they have been prescribed at its prescribed time, i.e. during that time, you can only read your Fajr. During Fajr time, you can't read your Zuhr namaz. During Zuhr time, you can't read the Asr namaz. During Asr time, you can't read the Maghrib namaz. That is the meaning of that particular verse. Now, as I mentioned before, when it comes to injunction, you look at the Holy Quran. So the Holy Quran is quite clear, quite explicit, saying that you have to read your namaz during its prescribed time. Then we find some hadiths which contradict this particular verse of the Holy Quran. We see some hadiths where it says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam combined his prayers, but that contradicts the verse of the Holy Quran. So in that situation, the Hanafi scholars have to interpret those hadiths according to the verse of the Holy Quran. And the Hanafi scholars, what they did was that they've interpreted the hadith, and they've said that the combination or the combining of two prayers, as mentioned in the hadith said by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, isn't the literal, or it is not the literal combination, but it is a metaphoric combination of the salah. Now, what do you mean by the metaphoric combination of the salah? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he was on a journey and he was really busy journey and so on with the camels and with his wives and so on, so what would Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? He will stop at a place and he would read his Zuhr namaz at its last possible time. And then as soon as the Asr namaz starts, he would read his Asr namaz. So I'll give you an example. Just say nowadays, like Asr time starts at 6:15. So if a person is traveling, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he was traveling, then he would stop at 6:10. At 6:10, he would read his Zuhr namaz, and then at 6:15, when the Asr time starts, he would read his Asr namaz. So even though there is an apparent combination of salah, even though there is an apparent combination of Zuhr and Asr, but it is not the literal combination. It's something which is known in fiqh as Jamai Suri, i.e. apparent combination where Rasulullah ﷺ has combined his Zuhr and Asr. However, because the respective prayers and namazes have been read at its prescribed time, so therefore that does not contradict the verse of the Holy Quran. So those hadiths where it says that Rasulullah ﷺ combined his two prayers, our reply or our answer will be that Rasulullah ﷺ, he combined it was an apparent combination, but the actual prayer itself, the Zuhr prayer, was done during the Zuhr time and the Asr prayer was read during the Asr time. So even though there was an apparent combination, but it is not the real combination, or it wasn't combination in its real sense that Rasulullah ﷺ read his Asr during Zuhr time. So that is our answer or our interpretation to those hadiths which seems to contradict the verse of the Holy Quran. And I'll just mention a hadith to support our view, that it is mentioned in a hadith of Muslim Ahmad that Sayyidah Aisha anha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reports that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was on a journey and it was and the Zuhr time was about to finish. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he waited until the last possible time. He read the Zuhr salah, and then as soon as he read his Zuhr salah, he waited for a few seconds or a few minutes until the Asr time started, and then after that he read his Asr salah. So this is a hadith of Muslim Ahmad, very clear, that saying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't combine his prayers, meaning that he didn't read Zuhr and Asr during Zuhr time, but in fact Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he read his Zuhr salah right at its last possible time, and then he read his Asr when the Asr time started. So that is like the conclusion of this particular masla or issue with regards to combining two prayers or not. Now the next topic or the subtopic which we are going to look at is with regards to the azan. Now azan is also an essential part of the namaz, and as I said, many of the masail with regards to azan can be found in Salimul Haq and Beshti Zawad, but again the contemporary issues are not mentioned in those books, so therefore I'll take this opportunity to very briefly mention a few things. Now azan is a very important part of the namaz. It is a sunnat muakkada of the namaz. Like for example, before you start your namaz, to say the azan is sunnat muakkada. And there are many virtues in giving the azan. And there is a hadith which can be found in Tabrani, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that the muazzin, i.e. the person who gives the azan, then on the day of judgment, he will enter paradise, he will enter Jannah without reckoning. Meaning that there will be no hisab for him. He won't be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that why did you do this deed for, or why did you do that, or why did you do that particular bad deed and so on. He won't be questioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the day of judgment, straight away, he will be granted Jannah and he will be granted paradise. And in another hadith of Sunan Abu Dawood and Sunan Tirmidhi, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that those people who gave azan, the muazzin, then on the day of judgment, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will intercede on their behalf. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and will tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that this person, for X amount of years, he called people towards the namaz, he called people towards the prayer. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will take this opportunity and will intercede for that person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's another hadith also of Sunan Tirmidhi in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that if a person has given azan for 7 years, like in 7 years, in a particular mosque he's been giving azan for 7 years, then that person will be freed from the fire of hell. Bara'atun minan nar, that he will be saved from the fire of hell. So from these few hadiths we can understand the importance and the virtues of giving azan. So wherever possible, try to give the azan. This is something where we shy away from, that if an opportunity arises and if somebody asks us like give the azan and so on, we will shy away from it. We'll say, oh, tell that person or tell that person. So obviously take this opportunity. There's many virtues of giving the azan. So wherever possible, try to give the azan and try to give the iqamah. Now, moving along, with regards to azan, the way azan became prescribed or the history of azan is different from the other pillars or from the other actions of Islam. For example, like zakat, hajj and fasting, the way it became compulsory was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam, told Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that zakat is compulsory upon your ummah, or that hajj is compulsory upon your ummah, or that fasting is compulsory upon your ummah. And as all of you know, with regards to namaz, the way namaz became compulsory was that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam went for the night journey, for the Mi'raj, for the ascension to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and namaz became compulsory. However, when we look at the way azan became prescribed, it is totally different from the other rituals and the other essentials of Islam. Now, what happened was, at the very beginning of Islam, when namaz became compulsory, the way the Muslims, or the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions would call the people towards namaz was by using a bell. The same way the Christians, they use a bell on Sunday, they chime the bell to call people towards the church. So similarly, at the very beginning of Islam, when namaz became compulsory, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahabas, they would chime a bell, and that would send an alert, or that would send a signal to the people that namaz is about to start, the salah is about to start, come and participate in the namaz. This is something which obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he disliked that practice. Why? Because there were similarities with the Christians and the disbelievers, but there weren't any other alternatives at that time. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Muslims, they would chime the bell, and by chiming the bell, that would send the signal, and that would alert the rest of the Muslims that namaz is about to start, and they would leave their homes, they would come to the mosque and read their namaz. Now, it is mentioned in a hadith of Musnad Ahmad, Sunan Tirmidhi, Sunan Abu Dawud and Sunan Ibn Majah, that there was a companion in the name of Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi. Now, one night he sees a dream, and he sees a dream that there was a man, and he's wearing two green garments. That he's wearing two pieces of clothes, and they are both green. And in one of his hands there is a bell, or he's holding a bell in one of his hands. So Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi, he goes to that man who's wearing these two pieces of garments, and he says to him that, can I buy this bell from you? So this man replied by saying that, why do you want a bell for? So Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi replied by saying that, I want this bell so I can call people towards the namaz. So I can call people towards the salah and towards the namaz. So this man who's wearing these two garments, he says to him that, shall I not tell you something more better than that? So Abdullah bin Zayd replied that, okay, what is it? Upon which that man replied by saying that, call people towards the namaz with the following words: Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. He said the full azan all the way until the end. The next morning, when Abdullah bin Zayd ibn Abdi Rabi, he wakes up, he goes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he tells Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the whole incident, that I saw this in my dream. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam verified his dream, agreed with his dream, and he told Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi that, go to Sayyiduna Bilal radhiyallahu anhu and tell him the words which you heard in the dream, and tell him to call people towards the namaz. So Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi, he went to Sayyiduna Bilal radhiyallahu anhu. Sayyiduna Bilal radhiyallahu anhu, he's calling people towards the namaz now with these words. And Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, who's at home at that time, he hears those words. He leaves his house, he comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, verily I saw the exact same dream. That I also saw the same dream, that I went to this person and I asked him that, can I buy this bell from you? And this person replied that, say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And upon which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied by saying, Alhamdulillah, that all praises are to Allah. Now, when we see the way azan became prescribed, it wasn't through a direct command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but in fact, the azan, it became sunnat muakkada, or it became prescribed through a dream sown by two Sahabi, Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abdi Rabi and Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, could say, had no kind of influence in that, because obviously he didn't see the dream. Those two dreams were shown to those two companions. But after that, when the companions narrated the story, related the story to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam verified the dream, accepted the dream, and then from then, that's when the azan became sunnat muakkada and emphasized sunnah for each namaz. Now you may be objecting, and you may be thinking that how can an important, essential part of namaz or a pinnacle of Islam be established through that way? Obviously something, and azan is sunnah muakkad, it's emphasized sunnah, and it is known as shi'aruddin, it is known as an important sign of Islam. So how come such a thing was revealed through the dreams of two companions and not through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now the answer to that is, firstly, number one, is that a dream is also a source of wahy. That a dream is also a source of divine revelation. And it is mentioned in a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim, in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that a ru'ya salihah, that a true dream is one of the 46 parts of prophethood. Meaning that a true dream, the same way like Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam coming and telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of a divine revelation, then similarly a true dream is also a divine revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So obviously, the first answer is that if somebody objects and says that how can a Islamic ruling be established through a dream, then tell them that look, a dream is also a source of revelation. Number two, the second reply is that this is such a dream which was seen by Abdullah bin Zayd bin Abd Rabi and by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Now those of you who don't know, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu was given the title of Al-Muhaddathun. Now what does Al-Muhaddathun mean? He was the inspired one. The verses of the Holy Quran were revealed according to the wills and desires of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Sometimes Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he thought of something or he wanted something, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed verses according to his wills and according to his desires. And I'll give you some examples. Like once Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu, he wanted the Maqam Ibrahim, which is in Baytullah, which is right in front of the Kaaba. He wanted that to be a place of worship where person, after he does the tawaf, then he goes behind the Maqam Ibrahim and he reads 2 rakat salah. So he wanted that to be a place of worship, upon which the verse وَاتَّخِذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى was revealed. Number 2, Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that good men and similarly immoral men, they visit your wives, they come to your home, they see your wives and so on. So there should be, this is Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu saying to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that there should be a verse of hijab, that there should be some kind of rulings of hijab or parda where a strange man cannot see your wife or cannot see anybody else's wife, upon which the verses of hijab were revealed. And number 3, another verse which was revealed according to the will of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu was with regards to the prisoners of the Battle of Badr. That when the Battle of Badr occurred, many hundreds of prisoners came in the hands of Muslims. So Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that you have 2 choices with regards to these prisoners. Either you can kill them, or number 2 is that you can take ransom, that free them and take money instead. However, if you take the second option, that if you free them and you take money instead, then what will happen is that the following year, the number of people you have freed, the following year, the number of Muslims will be martyred. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did mashwara, he consulted the fellow Sahaba, the fellow companions, and they all said that let's take the second option. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu wanted to take the first option. That was that they should kill the prisoners of war. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the fellow Sahaba said that let's take the second option. And they took the second option. The prisoners of war, they were freed according to some ransom, according to some money. Upon which the verse of Surah Al-Anfal was revealed, that مَا كَانَ لِنَبِيٍّ أَن يَكُونَ لَهُ أَسْرَى حَتَّى يُثْقِنَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. That a verse was revealed warning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or you could say warning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he shouldn't have taken the second option and he should have taken the first option according to the will of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu. So Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, he is that person according to his desires and wills. Verses of the Holy Quran were revealed. So if somebody objects and says that, look, how can a azan, or how can the way the azan became prescribed be revealed according to the dream of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, then tell them that, look, there are verses in the Holy Quran which were revealed according to the will, according to the desires of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu. So therefore, if dream seen by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, which was verified by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, approved by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is nothing, or that is not something strange for Islamic ruling or for an Islamic injunction to be revealed like that. So that is with regards to the history of the azan. I just very briefly just mention a couple of rulings with regards to the azan before we conclude. The first ruling with regards to azan, obviously everybody knows how to do azan, so we're not going to go over those rulings. But a couple of rulings is that, firstly, if he makes a mistake or if he omits a phrase of the azan, then what should that person do? Like, for example, just say a person, he read Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, then he should have read Hayya ala salah and Hayya ala salah, but instead he read Hayya al falah, Hayya al falah first. So in that situation, what should that person do? Now the masla or the ruling is that in a situation where a person has omitted some phrases of the azan, he should go back to the word or to the phrase which he had omitted, correct that, and then continue from there. So just say, for example, he said Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, he should have said Hayya ala salah, but instead he skipped that and he went on to Hayya al falah, Hayya al falah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, and then he remembered that, or forgot to say Hayya al salah. Then in that situation he will go back to the phrase which he had omitted, where he had missed that out. He will go back to that, he will read Hayya al salah, then continue the azan from there, Hayya al falah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, and then conclude his azan. There will be no detestability in the azan or anything like that. And the second ruling, which is similar to that, is with regards to the Fajr azan, where, as all of you know, after you read the Hayya al falah, you say as-salatu khayrun minan nawm twice. And because it's like slightly different from the other azan, then many people are prone to making mistakes here. That during the morning when no one's listening and they're a bit like tired and so on, a bit sleepy, they tend to forget as-salatu khayrun minan nawm. Now the ruling is exactly the same, i.e. that phrase which they have omitted, they will go back to that part, they will say as-salatu khayrun minan nawm, as-salatu khayrun minan nawm, and then conclude the azan from there, and they will say Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. So that is the masla, or there are the rulings for if a person, if he omitted something from the azan or some phrases from the azan, that a person, he should go back to where he made the mistake, he should correct that, and then from there continue and finish the azan off. Inshallah, I'll just leave it there for today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what's been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi. Anybody have any questions which you have written, if you could just forward it.